Hey guys, welcome back. This is week 18 of Project Life, and today I'm going to use a couple of different things. I have got another one of my citrus twist mega kits that I sort of broke down my stash and created two kits. This is one of them. I'm making the same mistake that I made last time, which is that the kits are too big. There's way too much choice in here for me. It takes me far too long to decide what to do, but next time I will definitely break these down a little bit smaller. I'm starting with my photos and I'm just picking through some of these cards here, but the other thing that I want to use today is some of the brand new digital Kellie Stamps sets. So as well as picking out a couple of cards here, I am also going to pick out a couple of different papers and then take you over to the computer and show you how I'm going to use some of these digital stamps on my spread this week. So obviously I've already printed my photos this week, so I've got some digital stamps from Kellie Stamps that I want to use, but because I batch printed my photos a few weeks ago, I can't then use a digital stamp on top of a photo I've already printed, and I don't want to reprint anything. So instead I'm going to use those digital stamps to create some cards and some pieces for my spread instead. So I'm going to do that in Silhouette Studio. I've just opened a new document, and the one thing that I do want to mention is to make sure that you have updated your software to 4.4 or above. They've included a new feature for that, which just makes life so much easier. I'll show you here. I'm going to drag in this April is cancelled, May isn't looking good either. This is from the cancelled digital stamp set. I'm just going to drag it in. It is a PNG file, and it already has cut lines. So you used to have to trace a PNG file, and with the software update you no longer have to do that. It comes in with a cut file already included, which just makes life so much easier. So that's the first stamp I want to use, and the other stamp that I want to use is this Netflix stamp. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just dragging the PNG file onto my studio software. I will note that only works for JPEGs, so for PNG files. So if you drag in a JPEG, you can see here it brings in the whole file. So the first thing that I want to create is the 3x4 card that is going to have this Netflix one on here. I'm just going to drag out a rectangle. It doesn't matter what size you make it because I'm going to put the correct size in here. So I want it to be 3 inches by 4 inches. And then I want to put my stamp down the bottom here so that I have room for my photo at the top. So I'm just going to resize that so it fits. And then select both of those and just center it to make sure it is centered on there. I'm just going to zoom in here so you can see what I'm doing. The first thing I want to do is just grab this, it was a PNG file, it's now an automatic digital cut file. I want to right click that and I want to release the compound path because I want the word Netflix to be cut out of my paper, and I want current mood to be printed. So I'm just going to select all of current mood and group that. And while I have that selected, I want to go to my send palette and I want no cut. So you can see how there's a red outline around all of the Netflix and my square, but now no longer on my current mood. And that is because I want it to print, not cut. So it's black, I'm going to print that in black. The Netflix here, I'm just going to grab this so I can group that. I don't want that to print. I don't want it to print black. I just want it to cut. So I'm going to fill it with nothing. So it is just a cut file. And then that is my 3x4 card all done. I can just grab that, group that all together. And the next sort of piece that I want to make, it's not going to be quite a 3x4 card. I'm thinking I want it to be like 3 inches high. And so I'll decide on the width once I've done this cut file. Just gonna resize this. Now I don't want this to print either, so I'm gonna just get rid of the fill on there for a second. The one thing that I am worried about cutting this actual file out is the letters are super close to each other. So the first thing I'm going to do is release the compound path again. And I'm just going to select each line of text and just using my arrow tools move those up. The other thing I don't need, and you can leave them as cut files, it won't matter, but the way this is going to cut out of my cardstock, I'm not going to see the middle of the letters, so I'm just going to delete those while I'm here. It'll just make it a neater cut because this is going to end up being quite small, but each line I am just going to go ahead and group. And you could manually move all of those. I've just moved the top and bottom one so there's a bigger space, and then I'm going to space them vertically. It just gives it a little bit more space in between there so I can make sure that I get a little bit of a neater cut. Then I can grab all of those and group them together, and I want to resize this so it fits inside my 3-inch square here. And I'm going to do the same thing again. Select both of those pieces and then center them. This is obviously much too wide, so I'm selecting the rectangle. I'm going to hold down my Alt key and just bring that in so I have another little piece, and I can just go ahead and group that. Now the last thing that I want to make is a piece for my title card, and I am going to use these large month PNGs, which you'll see are slightly different when I bring it in because the entire card is a PNG file as opposed to just the number. So I am going to go ahead and trace that using my trace tool. Just select the trace area and then hit trace, and then I can delete the actual card piece itself. I do want to create the 4x6 card though, so I'm going to do the same thing, just create a rectangle, resize that to 4x6, and then I want to add my 18 on there. I'm just going to adjust the spacing of this though, so I want to release the compound path. I'm just going to group my 8 back together. And then I'm going to select those numbers and head over to the modify palette, and I'm just going to divide that. So it's going to create all of these different pieces, and I can go ahead and delete those. And that just leaves this one cut out of my 4x6 card, and then I am going to do the same thing with my 8. And just delete those pieces. And then go ahead, and I'm just going to group all of that so I don't lose my little O's, but that gives me my 18 week card. And now all I have to do is go ahead and print all of these. Now the trick of this is, print and cut, because I want my current mood to be black. So the first thing I want to do is change my page size. This is 12 by 12. I'm going to need it to be a custom size. I want it to be 6 by 8 because that's the size of the papers that I've got in my mega kit. And because I'm going to print and cut this card, I am going to need to add some registration marks. I'm going to move my little card onto here. It doesn't really matter where it is. I'm going to end up cutting into most of this cardstock anyway, and it's going to have print marks on it, so I'm not too worried about where it is. I'm going to put this here, send this through my printer, and then once I've printed it out, it's going to print out with current mood and my crop marks, and then I can add it to my mat and then go ahead and send that through my silhouette. So for the other two pieces that I want to cut, I'm not going to need to print, so I can turn off, wrong button, turn off the registration marks here and just move my little Netflix card off to the side. What I'm going to do now is be the tiniest bit stingy, which is that I want to cut both of these pieces from the same 6x8 card. So the silhouette has these borders on the page sizes that I'm using, so nothing past this red mark is going to cut. So I'm not actually going to cut out the entirety of this card. I am going to need to trim that with some scissors or my paper trimmer. If you didn't need to do that, you could just flip this around and cut that out of the middle of your 6x8 paper. But like I said, I'm going to be stingy only because the sort of paper that I want to use is a little bit more neutral. It's really the only neutral paper that's in this mega kit that I've got, and I don't want to pull out anything else. So I'm going to just line that card up along the bottom. I'm leaving a little bit of gap so that it will end up cutting out this 8 piece, and I'm only going to need to trim the sides. You'll see what I mean in just a second. And so to get my other little April piece, I'm going to need to just flip that around as well, and I'm going to add this into the top here. Now I've lined up my paper onto my cutting mat, so like I said, there's no need to do the registration marks unless you want to print something. So I'm just going to go ahead and send that through my silhouette. Some of these cuts are quite small, so I am going to make sure I slow down the speed a little bit from what I would normally have. I've just got my settings on pattern paper, and I'm going to use my auto blade. And so normally it's got a depth of 3, a force of 30 and a speed of 5. I am just going to slow that down a little bit, and hopefully these little pieces will cut out nice and cleanly, not tear, but let's just see how we go. So it didn't cut too badly. I probably could have slowed it down a little bit more. These are some really small cuts here, and I suspect actually the bigger problem might be that I need a new mat. This mat is it's lost pretty much most of its stick. When you're using a silhouette like this, there are lots of different things that need to be working right for it to cut properly, which is a pain, but it's just how it is. So you kind of just have to go with the flow and make the best of it. Now you can see what I meant there about the silhouette not actually cutting the full 4x6 card. All I had to do was make 4 tiny little cuts with my scissors. Didn't even bother to get my paper trimmer out. Just a couple of little snips with the scissors work nicely. And that gives me my card here with the 1 and the 8 on it. I'm just going to really loosely stick that down with a little bit of tape runner. And that I had picked out that really darker blue, and so this tones it down quite nicely. Now I just placed the 8 back in so that I could line up those dots perfectly. It's a really handy tip if you want to put the inside of letters back into letters, is to keep those the pieces that you're not going to need. You don't need to glue them in, just sit them where they're supposed to go, and then you can fill in the gaps super easily. Now I'm pretty lucky that this mega kit actually had some alpha sets that have a full set of week letters in there, so I've just used some of those to spell out week, and I made sure to overlap it just a little bit over that one, and then I picked out one of the labels that I've got. I pulled out all the labels from the die cuts just to make it easier for when I needed this sort of thing, and I've picked one that's kind of a peachy color, kind of an orangey color. Don't have a particularly distinct color scheme this week. There are a lot of sort of blues and teals, and so I've added some pinks and corals to it as well, so I'm going to add both of those colors into that title card. Now here's that smaller cut file piece that we made. It is a little bit sticky from the silhouette mat, so probably technically I could have just stuck it straight onto the photo. I just added a few tiny little dots of liquid adhesive, and the liquid adhesive I use is just really cheap PVA glue. I do use a needle nose bottle just to make it a little bit easier. I will leave links for anything that I can down below. Like I said, this is kind of a stash kit, so there's not a lot left in my stash that I can link to. But anything that I can, including all of these digital stamps, I'll leave those down below. Now for the Netflix card, I didn't really want to leave it blank. It will just show through whatever the back of the card behind it is in the page protector. So I decided to back it. I started looking through the cards to find something else, but decided I didn't need any more colours on here. So I used a little scrap left over from that 18 title card, and that just keeps a little bit more of that consistency through the whole spread. So I've used that paper 3 different times. Now for this bottom 4x6 card, I pulled out some actual stamps. This is the Mama Life clear set, and I believe it's actually on sale at the moment at Kellie Stamps. So again, I will leave a link for that down below. And I want to do a little bit of repeat stamping. I knew there was a coffee cup on here, and this was the first week we were sort of released from lockdown a little bit, and so I wanted to use the coffee cup stamp to do some repeat stamping on this 4x6 card. I made a tiny mistake though in that I couldn't really test the color of the ink because I don't have any more of this paper. This is all I've got left. So the mistake I feel like I made is the ink is much darker than I had wanted it to be. I was going to repeat stamp this entire card, and I just felt like it would be super overwhelming, but like I said, this is the only piece that I've got. So what I decided to do was stop stamping. I'm just going to create this like little stamped strip down the bottom, and it's not going to be overwhelming, but it sort of gets the point across for what I wanted. So I got lucky that I didn't force myself to carry on, and I'm going to come up with a different plan for the card instead. I started off by going through some of the other stamp sets that are in my mega kit. There were a few that were quite coffee themed, so it would have worked nicely, but I feel like I had to keep sort of making everything work because it was quite a small gap that I had to stamp in there, and so in the end what I decided to do instead was to add just a tiny bit of journaling in there, and I just did that on my typewriter, so it filled up the gap. It's not too overwhelming visually because it sort of just becomes a bit of a block, and it does mean I get a tiny bit of journaling on here. I didn't want to put too much. It was a tough week, I'll be honest. It was a weird, tough week. Aren't they all at the moment? So I didn't want to add too much in the way of misery to my journaling. So just that little block of text sits there nicely and doesn't take up too much visual space. Now I've got a whole bunch of embellishments in this mega kit, obviously, a lot of chipboard. As I was looking through the chipboard, this one just struck me. It says this is the real thing because this was the first lot of takeaway that we had for quite a few weeks. And I added just one more chipboard piece to that kind of coffee card down the bottom as well. Just again for a little bit of consistency and just to tie the photo, the stamping and the journaling all together. Now the other thing that's in this mega kit is a few different sheets of these like tiny phrase stickers. So I'm going to use a couple of them on the 2 photos that haven't really had anything done to them. So I'm just repeating that kind of pattern of stacking the 2 stickers, and that's this week all done. I really enjoy using digital stamps. It does take a little bit more time with this sort of whole process, but I love the way it turns out. The texture is awesome, so I highly suggest you give it a go. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. If you want to keep watching, there are a couple more videos on screen. Otherwise, I'll see you guys next time. Bye!